More than 2 months into the war in Ukraine, and both sides are taking heavy losses. While the bombardment goes on, Moscow has kept up its relentless propaganda, accusing NATO of conducting a proxy war with Russia. My guest this week is Lesia Vasylenko, politician and human rights lawyer, who joins me from Kyiv. What makes her so sure Mr Putin wouldn't press his nuclear button?
In all honesty, Putin has made so many claims which he never went ahead with. Saying that he is willing to deploy nuclear weapons in Ukraine would be suicidal to him and to his own country and his own people as well.
In recent weeks, she's had blunt words for the West and NATO, accusing the alliance of cowardice and watching the war as if it were a movie. Does she still feel that way? And what about a future peace deal with Russia? Is there any sign at all of what it might look like? All that and much more on Conflict Zone. Lesia Vasylenko, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
More than 2 months into this war, some 5 million of your people have left as refugees, but now hundreds of thousands are coming back, sometimes against the advice of local authorities. What does that tell you about your people, your country?
It's a resilient and stubborn people that Russia has to deal with. And we are very confident in our victory and very confident in the victory of freedom and independence. And the people who you are seeing coming back are the people who, more than anything, want to live in a free and independent Ukraine and are prepared to do everything to rebuild it from the wrath of Russia's aggression.
We've seen Ukrainians forced to confront unbelievable pain and loss almost on a daily basis. Some have spoken in interviews about their continuing disbelief at what's happening to them. Do you share that feeling?
Every single Ukrainian has lost something in this war. The worst is people having to endure losses of close ones, like family members and dear friends. People have lost property, have lost houses, homes. Everyone's at a loss. Why it happened? Because of Russia. We know it very clearly now. How it was possible to even go as far as the Russians did with all the crimes they are committing currently in the territory of Ukraine. This is something unfathomable. This is something that many Ukrainians, myself included, still cannot puzzle together.
What have you learned about yourself during this period?
Oh, a lot. I think that myself, like many other Ukrainian women, we uncovered a strength that we never knew we had before. These past 2 months and a bit have been about unity and have been about resilience for every single person, for every single family in Ukraine. We have discovered all, myself included, that we are a strong people. We are a nation, a united nation, and a nation that really, really loves its country and is prepared to die for it.
And the knowledge, as you say, prepared to die for it, but the knowledge that life could end today, tonight, tomorrow, for you and those who you care about, is that an ever-present feeling? And does that sap your focus, or does it, in a way, inspire you?
I've learned to live with it personally, and so have millions of Ukrainians who remained in Ukraine. It's a strange feeling that you know that it can all end tomorrow, but I think the fear of losing freedom and losing life in a free Ukraine, losing the home, is greater than the fear of losing your own life.
You mentioned the crimes that are being committed, and you've been keeping track of some of the war crimes, allegations that have been piling up against Russian forces, especially when it comes to the treatment of women and girls. How shocking has that been for you?
That is exactly what my mind cannot put together. The puzzle pieces are there right in front of me on the table with the facts of the rapes committed against Ukrainian women, Ukrainian children, Ukrainian unarmed men. I have the facts of numerous tortures. They're all there, laid out on the table, sometimes with absolutely devastating pictures to go with them. But my brain cannot process the cruelty behind it, the intent and the violence. And this is the restlessness with which I also had to learn to live with, the restlessness of the brain, which then leads to many sleepless nights.
Do you believe that Russian commanders have ordered these crimes that are alleged to have been committed, or simply turned a blind eye to them?
I believe that it's a strategy of the Russian army, as well as of the leadership of Russia as a country, to destroy Ukraine and Ukrainians in every way possible. What the Russians are doing is more than just physically killing Ukrainian soldiers. They are trying to erase the Ukrainian nation from the face of the earth, and they are doing this in so many different ways. The fact that our children today, for more than 2 months, have been deprived of proper education. The schools are closed, the kindergartens are closed, the universities are closed all across Ukraine. There's only online schooling. The children are not in schools learning new things, not socializing with their kids, but they are hiding in bomb shelters. They are in the basements, hiding from Russian artillery and from Russian soldiers who are hunting them down to kill them, to torture them, to rape them. And this is a future generation of Ukrainians which will be growing up with huge traumas and with very, very limited education and learning skills. This is Ukraine we are talking about, a European nation which has prided itself for years in the number of literate people, literate children, of the successes, educational successes of the children in schools. And Russia is taking that away. They are destroying that deliberately.
What about the chances of bringing winnable prosecutions against any of the soldiers that have been committing these acts? So far, I believe 10 have been identified as suspects from the unit that occupied Bucha, where the bodies of civilians, apparently shot in summary executions, were left lying in the streets. Do you have any hope that these people might be brought to trial, might be brought to justice?
I'm confident that justice will be served. It will be served in the Ukrainian courts and within the Ukrainian justice system. It will be served in international judicial bodies, such as the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice. And I firmly believe that eventually the world will set up a special criminal tribunal for Putin, all his cronies, all the generals and all the soldiers who have been committing war crimes in Ukraine.
Talk to me, if you will, about life under occupation in Kherson, for instance. Is there anything in Russia's behavior there that allow you to form any view of their long-term aims, the Russians' long-term aims? I gather the mayor has been replaced, the currency is being replaced with Russian rubles, reports that Russian textbooks have been brought into schools, that the internet has been disconnected and reconnected to Moscow's own system. Is this the template, as far as you're concerned, preparations being made for permanent occupation of the places where they are at the moment?
It looks like it. I mean, you asked me a couple of questions back about whether there's a fear about dying. And I've said to you that there's a fear about losing this freedom. You can rephrase it by saying there's a fear of living under such conditions that you have just described, of occupied Kherson, where you just don't lose everything, like physically, because your home is destroyed, but you are told how to live. You are being deprived of information channels, you are being deprived of your language, of your history, of your currency even, and you are being told that this is it, this is how you live now. You have no choice. And I think this is the worst fear that every Ukrainian has. And for us, Kherson, Melitopol, Mariupol, they are all the cities which epitomize what the Russians are trying to impose on all of Ukraine. And again, this gets the Ukrainian nation even more united and even more determined to fight even harder.
What's the role of a politician like you under these circumstances? What can you do for your constituents? How do you even keep track of the living and the dead?
Today it's much easier than back in the day, I imagine, because of the social media. And because everybody literally has devices with internet and can do a wider outreach. And this is how we learn today of the needs of the people. The role of politicians is to be here on the ground with the people of Ukraine, supporting them, liaising them with the partners, the international partners who can provide assistance and who can provide relief to the various needs.
And we're talking about basic needs here. We're talking about getting food to people, medicine, care for the sick and elderly, that sort of thing.
Humanitarian aid, absolutely, if you want one word for it.
How and at what level do the mechanics of daily life continue, though, under this constant bombardment?
Actually, now it has become more or less back to normal, if you like. I'm talking now from downtown Kyiv. I see in the street a lot of cars, a lot of people passing by. The shops are reopened, the cafes are reopened. Nevertheless, we have air raid sirens sounding from time to time. And we learn to live with it in the background, and we learn to make best of it. And every single person has found a space in their life for volunteer work, for helping others who are worse off than they are. And the same goes for parliamentarians, for politicians, for government officials. Apart from our regular duties about writing laws, debating them in parliament, voting on them, discussing them in committees, we find a lot of space and a lot of time for coordinating volunteer work, for coordinating humanitarian aid, for coordinating military assistance to the different territorial defense units and to the different military units even. So everybody's doing their bit to keep Ukraine safe, to keep the community safe, and at the end of the day, to keep their families and themselves safe.
You said recently that 80% of your thoughts are directed at the now, the war, but 20% is thinking about the future and about reconstruction. How vital is that from a practical point of view, and I suppose from the point of view of morale as well?
It's absolutely important to look to the future, to know your past and to act in the present. So, of course, the conditions are such today that we have to concentrate on the present to survive. And that's the main thing. But then again, we're talking about people coming back to Ukraine. We're talking about people coming back to find destruction in the towns that have been occupied by Russia and have been freed by Ukraine. And these towns need rebuilding. This is just a simple example as that. And to rebuild them, there needs to be a vision of rebuilding. There needs to be a plan, like there was a Marshall Plan for Europe. There must be a certain plan for Ukraine. Today we call it the Brussels Plan, because essentially it's the EU institutions which have come forward and which have started to devise a certain scheme as to how to renew Ukraine and how much money needs to be allocated to it. The UK, although already not part of the EU, but the UK is playing a big role as well. There's a whole team of British economists which is now working with Ukrainian specialists and experts to also devise a plan of economic recovery, which would touch also on the energy sector, on the agricultural sector, on the industrial and trading sectors. So work is being done, but of course, the Ukrainian counterparts cannot dedicate 100% of time to that work.
Mrs. Vasylenko, on the political front, you've recently been very critical of the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, because he went to Moscow a few days ago before going to Kyiv. What did he bring back from Russia? Anything that your government thought was worth listening to?
He brought back a missile attack on a building in Kyiv, which was destroyed, and several people died from that missile attack, and 10 or so were injured and taken to hospital with heavy wounds. Apart from that, not much has resulted.
Not really his fault, though.
Not really his fault, no. But the point is that I think and this is the point that I have tried to make many times, is that the UN needs reform. The UN as a system has failed big time to prevent wars in the past and to prevent this war of Russia's aggression, which has been going on for 8 years now. Russia staying on the Security Council, having veto power, is absolute nonsense. I mean, Russia is responsible for the insecurity in the world and the instability in the world today. And they are there making security decisions. We have, as Ukrainians, time and time again, raised the issue about the reform of the UN system. We were not heard. Then when we have the Secretary General first going to Moscow, and then coming to Kyiv? That also doesn't make sense. Why go and pay the respects and the dues to the aggressor first? Come to Ukraine, see what Russia has done, and then go to Putin with the demands, not the other way around. This was the point I was trying to make. But okay, to be fair, after the Secretary General's visit, the evacuation of the people from Azovstal and the steel works in Mariupol has started and has had many successes. So I'm grateful for that. I would love to believe that it's because there were these negotiations with the UN Secretary General involved. If that is the case, then with great gratitude and great respect, I say thank you to the UN Secretary General.
Along with other Ukrainian MPs, you've spent some time shuttling between Western capitals, explaining Ukraine's position, its requirements, its views, and especially its suffering. And you've heard a lot of overarching expressions of solidarity and promises of full support, but you haven't been that impressed with them, have you? A lot of them.
Not with all of them. Words are words, and words are important. The solidarity messages, they are well received here in Ukraine. They also allowed the Ukrainian people to go on for so long, because knowing that there's this and feeling this immense support from every single country in Europe, or almost every single country in Europe on the continent, was a great push for the Ukrainians to keep going, to know that we're not alone in this, and to know that the big European family to which we strive so much is there with us. That's important. But of course, what I would like to see more of is that these words would be backed up by action. And we are slowly getting there. So Ukraine is getting more weapons, and Ukraine is getting more help in terms of humanitarian financial assistance. And Russia is getting more and more sanctions around it. And these sanctions are becoming more robust. The only thing is that it would have been better for everyone's sake, not just for Ukraine, if all of this was happening faster and a couple of months back.
But in time, a few weeks ago, you accused Western countries of doing the bare minimum and standing on the sidelines watching Ukraine as if it was a boxing match or a TV documentary. You've changed your views since then. There's a lot more than the bare minimum, isn't there?
Today when I see the lists of the weapons which are being delivered by the Western allies, and when I know for a fact from reports of the military units that I know personally that these weapons get to where they're supposed to get, and they are being used for good use, then I have no reason to be unhappy about it. I mean, these weapons and this support, the main idea is for it to keep coming until the plague of Russia's aggression is stopped and returned back into within the borders of Russia.
You wanted a no-fly zone. You didn't get it. Do you want NATO troops fighting alongside you in Ukraine?
Well, that would be always the preferred option.
But you understand why they're not.
At the same time, although that's always the preferred option, the more we have allied powers here side to side with us, fighting for freedom and for democracy and for peace in the world, the better. But at the same time, Ukrainian army has proven itself to be absolutely self-sustainable when it comes to fighting of the Russians, as long as we have the means to fight with. And if the NATO powers and the international community provides us with those instruments, provides us with those weapons and the armaments, then we're good to go. We can withstand Russia's aggression. We can keep fighting for the rest of Europe. We can be the protectors of Europe while protecting, of course, ourselves and our freedom at the same time.
But when Putin has openly referred to his nuclear arsenal and has put it, he says, on a higher state of alert, you wouldn't expect the West and NATO in particular not to take that threat seriously, would you?
In all honesty, Putin has made so many claims which he never went ahead with. Saying that he is willing to deploy nuclear weapons in Ukraine would be suicidal to him and to his own country and his own people as well. And it's a good thing that it's not just him alone, Putin alone, who's in charge of pressing that one red button. there's a whole line of command to start deploying nuclear weapons. And in all honesty, if Putin has gone completely insane, which is clearly the case, not all of his generals and not all of the people in the line of command in Moscow have gone as badly insane as to wish death upon themselves and their families.
Do you still think that the UN and NATO, as you said in a tweet on March the 13th, are showing weakness and cowardice?
As I said, the UN needs reforming, and very fast. NATO is NATO. I mean, in all fairness, NATO is abiding by the rules in their rule book. Fair enough. But at the same time, the different NATO states are showing more confidence and more courage than that whole organization put together. And I think this is the courage that Ukrainians expect from their partners. You know, now there's a snap line going around saying, be brave like Ukraine. And this is what we want from our friends.
But cowardice is perhaps an unfair criticism, isn't it?
An unfair criticism of what?
Of NATO and the UN?
Well, look, the UN as an organization has deep structural problems. I've covered already the ground about Russia being a country with a veto power on the Security Council, being responsible for the insecurity. The UN could have sent peacekeeping troops into Ukraine through a General Assembly decision. It hasn't done so for fear of provoking World War III. But in all honesty, Putin would never dare to attack any other country for the very reason that he has no resources for doing that. And for the very reason that he is concentrated on Ukraine and maybe a couple of other Eastern European countries, because Putin, his goal is to rebuild a Russian empire. This is the ideology behind this war. This is the ideology behind how Russia functions as a country. They want an empire. They feel great in an empire. They want to bring empires in the worst possible sense back from the history books. This is what they are doing. They're not interested in going ahead with wars in, I don't know, Asia, Africa, the Americas, because they would not be able to pull it off. And when the world stands united, in the same way that Ukrainians stood united against Putin, there would be nothing that he could do. This war could have stopped way earlier. The 3 days that the international experts were giving us as a nation for standing up against the second largest army in the world could have been really 3 days to end this war. If NATO forces, UN forces would have intervened in time, this war could have been over in 3 days, but it could have been over for Russia in 3 days.
There are plenty of Western experts who dispute your assurance that Putin would never press the button and use his nuclear missiles. But I want, in the time we have left, to look at where the war might go now. A month ago, President Zelensky said that negotiation was the only way out of the conflict. But he added, you cannot just demand from Ukraine to recognize some territories as independent republics. These compromises are simply wrong. We have to come up with a model where Ukraine will not lose its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. Do you have any idea what that model might look like?
That model is very simple. I mean, Russia is committing a crime of aggression. There's no doubt about that. I think it's very much clear for all of the international community what Russia is doing. That crime of aggression has clear criteria. It's described in a number of conventions. And with that, there's also consequences which pertain to when a crime of aggression is committed. And the consequences are such that, first of all, the crime must be stopped. Hence, Russia must retreat all of its troops from Ukraine. The borders of Ukraine must be reinstated, and then Russia must pay reparations. It's as simple as that. There's no other negotiations that can be taking place. Any negotiations where Ukraine is presumably requested to give up any territories or to make any kind of other concessions to Russia will fail. These negotiations will not bring long-standing peace to Ukraine, to Europe, or to the world. These kind of secession negotiations will only incite more aggression in the world. It will inspire other authoritarian leaders across the world to follow in Putin's footsteps, and they will inspire Putin to go in for more land grabs. The only solution is to make Russia stop its crime of aggression, to restore the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and to make Russia pay for all the crimes that it has committed in the territory of Ukraine and for the crime of aggression against international peace and security.
Lesia Vasylenko, it's been very good to have you on Conflict Zone. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.